I can see demand for commodities decreasing in the near term
Okay.
as a consequence of a recession. But if I look in the longer term, 4 to 5 years, demographics, 8 billion people on Earth, urbanizing increases demand. And I see supply inexorably declining. I see a circumstance, where while the near term is cloudy, the longer term, and I'm not talking about 50 years from now, I'm talking about 5 years from now or 6 years from now, is stupendously bullish.
Renowned investor, speculator, and president of Rule Investment Media, Rick Rule, says he's stupendously bullish on the commodities market in the long term, especially for commodities like gold, silver, and copper. Rick believes the world consistently failed to shore up the productive capacity of extractive commodities, instead focusing more on using up these commodities. With the world's massive 8 billion population rapidly urbanizing, Rick is certain that the demand for these commodities will continue to increase exponentially, while the supply side will continue to fall short. Though Rick predicts it would take another 3 or 4 years for the world to fully catch on to the declining supply of these essential resources, there's adequate evidence to suggest it has already started. Last year, the S&P Global Market Intelligence projected that annual global copper demand would nearly double from 25 million to roughly 50 million tons by 2035. In the previous year, global copper mine production sat at approximately 22 million tons, short of the 25 million tons demand recorded in the same year. Experts believe the supply and demand gap will continue to widen. Even if mining output continues to grow at the current annual rate of 2.69%, global output in 2035 will only be around 31 million tons, far from the S&P's estimates of 50 million tons in demand. This is why Rick Rule says he is stupendously bullish on commodities. But before we begin to hit the metaphorical gold mine, Rick says we first have to navigate some stormy waters. According to the renowned investor, we entered a new era of the global economy in 2022. This era ended the abundance of the previous 40-year bull market and cemented the need for a reckoning for the global economy. Rick believes we are now in an era of markedly high interest rates, economic decline, and shifting geopolitical dynamics. Gone are the days the U.S. Federal Reserve will be able to manipulate the markets, and the shift away from the country's dominance on global trade has only just begun. Rick describes this next era as a period of reckoning, where we pay for the policies of the past and prepare for a better, hopefully, less gloomy future. We will now bring clips from one of Rick's recent interviews with Small Cap's Carrie Stevenson. Please watch, share, and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos. Also, ensure you drop your comments and observations in the comments section below to help the video reach more viewers. Thanks, and enjoy.
In my heart of hearts, I think we're going to have a recession. I'm not an economist, but I don't think that the rules of economics or the rules of cyclicality have been ruled out. I think that beginning in 2022, that we've begun a very different epoch than the one that existed in the period 1982 to 2022. I think we had 40 years of benign economic climate.
Okay.
The consequence of that is that we enjoyed the benefits of workplace inclusion. Again, I don't want to sound too woke, but I think that was a good thing.
Yeah.
We certainly enjoyed lower interest rates, and we enjoyed an internationalism. We enjoyed the urbanization of 650 million Chinese, as an example. I think that that period is over. I'm not saying that the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket, but certainly the period of declining real interest rates is over.
Yep.
I think increasingly the world is setting up into nationalistic economic blocs that will attempt to serve the self-interest of politicians inside these blocs rather than humankind as a whole. So I think that the climate is going to be less benign than it has been. And I also think that recessions serve the purpose of reducing business confidence and reintroducing common sense. I think, too, that although this hasn't been a correct assumption in the last 2 years, that a rising cost of capital will impact investing, and the rising cost of capital will devalue the value of income streams like dividends. Mm-hmm. So at the same time that the cost of capital through debt increases, that capitalized equities values through dividends goes down.
Yep.
I'm not trying to say that we're going to have a stock market crash. There is so much cash on the sidelines, so much cash in private hands that the stock market doesn't necessarily need to decline. But I think you might see some leadership shifts in the market, and you may continue to see stock market declines. But I do believe in my heart of hearts that we're due for at least a slowdown in the general economy. That isn't to say that I've stopped investing. A person who's a pessimist at age 70 does not start a bank. I think the future of humankind is wonderful, but I think there's probably a reckoning between here and there. And certainly if you look at the free cash balances in my personal account, you'll see that I've been overall playing defense and building up fairly large cash balances. It is entirely likely that a stock I buy today for, let's say, a speculative stock, a stock that I buy today for $1, that I think is likely to be worth $3 or $4, goes to 60 or 80 cents first. It's happened dozens of times in my career, literally dozens of times in my career. And it's sort of, I don't mean to say it's irrelevant, but I look at two sides of the coin. I can see demand for commodities decreasing in the near term as a consequence of a recession. But if I look in the longer term, 4 to 5 years, demographics, 8 billion people on Earth, urbanizing increases demand, and I see supply inexorably declining. We have, as a species, underinvested for 30 years in the productive capacity around a whole range of extractive commodities, copper as an example. You have a circumstance where the productive capacity, Christ, Carrie, it's as old as me, long past its prime. I think, too, that the mini boom that we had in capital raisings, both in the 2008 to 2011 timeframe, and then again in the 2018, 19, and 2020 timeframe, that part of it which went in the ground is beginning to bear fruit now. I think we're coming into the beginnings of a new of a new exploration cycle.
Okay.
I have noted in prior cycles that it takes about a decade for the industry to employ new technology or go into new places and get results. And we have been now in this mini exploration cycle for 10 or 12 years. And I'm beginning to see exploration results around the world that attract my attention. So that makes me bullish.
During his discussion with Carrie, Rick speaks about another feature of the new era we are heading into. The 70-year-old investor describes this feature as the single scariest development of his lifetime. It is no other than the advent and rapid proliferation of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. According to Rick, CBDCs are quite scary because they give policymakers absolute power and control over a person's lifestyle, choices, and even how they interact with the world around them. CBDCs will make it very easy for politicians to crush anyone who opposes their policies, which is why over 95% of the world's central banks have readily accepted them.
The idea of a central bank digital currency, particularly if you combine it with artificial intelligence and social scoring, the way the Chinese are doing, with a central bank digital currency as opposed to with cash, or better yet, gold, if they don't like the way you think and act, they can cancel your money.
Yeah.
Now, my government can get angry at me, but if they can't find me and I have a bunch of cash in my pocket, they can't do much to penalize me. But with a central bank digital currency, they could say Rick's money is no longer. And you've seen some of my posts on social media. I'm afraid they might do just exactly that. Yeah. Anything that gives the government more control over my own wealth, my own behavior, and the free interaction between members of society, I think is a very dangerous thing. I had hoped in my 20s that the advent of technology would give people access to more freedom and less reliance on government. But this central bank digital currency is probably the single scariest development in my lifetime. The only thing that gives me cause for confidence is that there's 450 million guns in private circulation in the United States. And we have a history going back in time of if you push us too far, we push back. And my hope is that if the big thinkers think about the possible reaction of Americans when they've been pushed too far, that they will be encouraged to prudence, if not by their faith in the American populace, then by the existence of 450 million means of self-protection. My suspicion is that we have had a, 15-year lurch to the left, and we've had a 15-year lurch, too, away from common sense into sort of woke speech. And my suspicion about that is, and I don't want to sound politically correct myself, but both the man and the woman on the street are beginning to think enough is enough.
I hope so.
This is silly. I don't mind reading cartoons, but I'm sick of living in a cartoon. And I have no particular interest in having my family's future determined by a bunch of big thinkers who don't know how to define a woman, as an example, or people who believe that they have the right to distribute your property as you, as opposed to they see fit.
Yeah.
And I'm actually very heartened. I do a lot of mentoring of young people, as I think you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Carrie, through organizations like Students for Liberty. I mentor a group of minority ex-offenders in the United States. And I need to say that probably in the last year, maybe my audience is self-selecting, but basically every young person's group that I talk to about these circumstances looks at both me and the world in dismay and says that there's no part of common sense that's in evidence, either with the discussions that we're having as a society or the way that we govern our finances. And I see that as extremely positive.
In what way, Rick? What do you mean extremely positive? That there's
well, in the sense that for 20 years they've ignored this lurch towards socialism. They've ignored this lurch towards woke public speech. And increasingly, the young people who the big thinkers purport to represent in these struggles, the very young people that the struggles are suggested to benefit are saying, this is silly. This is insane. These proposals ignore common sense.
In addition to the coming explosion in the supply and demand gap, another reason to invest in commodities now is to prepare yourself for the ultimate descent into widespread anarchy, as Rick has correctly described. A good example of what's coming for us all is what's already happening in China. As one Weibo user aptly puts it, Big Brother is not only watching you, but also your wallet. There have already been lots of reports about the Chinese Communist Party using the digital yuan to continue its oppression on citizens and crush dissidents. Though it might be more subtle in the democratic West, the results will be the same: absolute control and power over all at the push of a few buttons. What are your thoughts on Rick Rule's bullish prediction for commodities in the long term? Please leave your comments and observations in the comments section. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos. We appreciate the support.